Paul Kelly wrote in The Australian this week that Australia now lives in a Labor ascendancy that will run at least until the early 2030s. And it's a time which we'll see economic policy completely re-engineered, evolutionary change.
Okay, so this episode, I assume, is going to touch on outcomes from the economic roundtable and basically what was, being presented throughout. It's probably going to touch mostly on tax and probably 4-day work week stuff and, productivity and whatnot. So if you paid attention to the roundtable, let me know what you thought of the outcomes, whether you think it was a productive roundtable or do you think it was a bit of like a government hype and, maybe playing some smoke and mirrors around some other topics or things that were going on in Australia. Let me know what you think. And let me know what you think they didn't address or they could address more. Yeah, share your thoughts down below.
Is coming, he says.
Oh, and I've had more people start to comment and stuff on my YouTube videos, which is fantastic. Thank you for those who sort of, share your thoughts and stuff like that. If you can like the videos and also subscribe, that will be extremely helpful because it will help my channel grow. It means I can do more of these videos. And if you have any sort of suggestions, throw them out too. I like covering all things. So anyway, here we go.
And that this will be driven by modern Labor's values and what it thinks it can actually achieve politically in real terms, which, given its huge majority in the Parliament and control of the Senate with the Greens, would be probably a heck of a lot right now. Kelly says that while it's still a work in progress, the main element...
Okay, I think that the talking point around, because Labor has the majority in the lower house and the Greens have the majority in the Senate, it means that they have this like free range to just pass, bills and stuff. I think that needs to go because as I can sort of see it, it doesn't seem to be like the Greens are just, they're not the same. It's not the same between Labor and the Greens anymore. I think there's a bit of a shift there. So I think this kind of talking point needs to be adjusted. It's kind of similar with the coalition, like with Liberals and Nationals. They're not really seen eye to eye. There's some funky stuff going on there. So I think it's kind of very similar with the Greens. I think agree, disagree. Put it down below.
Of Labor's agenda seem to be as follows: a complete rejection of any industrial relations deregulation, so no freeing up things for business owners and bosses in the workplace. Little interest in any public sector spending restraint, so no government tightening its belt at all. So more tax will be needed as a result of that to address a decade of fiscal deficits. A more government-directed industry policy and a renewed emphasis on workforce skills. Greater interventions by the state in the economy, so more socialism and less liberalism. You can forget about more free and market forces-led economy. And enshrining the renewable energy transition as pivotal in reviving economic... There have been some very dumb ideas already floated at the Labor Government's Economics Roundtable, previously known as the Productivity Roundtable. To take a look at some of them, we've got our own roundtable on the roundtable happening this week on the other side, and I'm joined by other side regulars, former Bloomberg editor and data analyst Dan Petrie, head of the Australia Institute for Progress think tank Graham Young, and economist Gene...
Hang on. Before we jump into this, I've seen a few sort of comments around like Sky News and some others like saying like all they're trying to do is just basically increase tax. But it kind of looks like from that productivity roundtable there, already Labor is reducing income tax. They're talking about reducing tax on like corporate tax for businesses under 50 mil and stuff like that. Like it kind of sounds like they're doing a lot in terms of reducing tax burden. So I don't know where this increase in taxes. I mean, I know there are increasing taxes in terms of maybe capital gains, revisiting the capital gains discount. They may possibly looking at this. Well, they are looking at the superannuation and things like that. Inheritance tax, I think, is another thing. Oh, there's a few others, but like they're not really. That doesn't really sort of seem to address a majority of the population. So I don't quite always agree with that talking point, but
Tunny, gentlemen, welcome back. Paul Kelly says evolutionary change is coming and Labor will be running things well into 2030. So this is a classical liberal economist's worst nightmare, isn't it, Graham?
I wouldn't call it evolution.
Devolution?
Well, what we need is more devolution in the economy so that people who are close to the decisions that need to be made actually make them and are allowed to get on with things. So no, it won't be that either. It's reversion. I mean, all those things, if they're Labor values, they're like, remember that Sally Robbins, I think it was, who lay down in the middle of the Olympics and the racing team? That's what this government is. They're laying down. There is not a single thing there that I'd call a value. It's just laziness.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to change a single thing. We don't want to work harder.
Okay, if you were running the show, Gene Cunny, what would be your top 3 things to get productivity going in Australia right away?
Well, okay, he should be asking that question to the guy who just slammed it just before. Because what we got no industrial relations deregulation, little interest in government spending cuts, more tax. Yeah, so like even when you look at what he just proposed there in the Australian, like that's it's not right.
Certainly, put you on the spot.
Yes, I reckon. See that this whole thing it's going to be just a big slander on the whole thing with little information or detail about, what they think should have been an outcome. That's just my prediction. Okay, let's find out. How about this? How about you put down what your predictions are for this video? Put them in the comments, and we'll see if we can get this right.
I mean, this is why I'll never be elected, but we need to really significantly cut spending. We've got too many resources going into the government sector, into less productive activities, and that's increasing the tax burden on the rest of us. So we really need to get spending under control, cut taxes to incentivise work effort and incentivise investment.
Okay, so oh fuck, this is frustrating. Where do you want to cut spending? And when you're talking about cutting taxes, they are cutting taxes in terms of income tax. They are looking at cutting, corporate tax. Like, what else are you looking for? And hey, there are some good taxes probably to cut. They could look at states could look at stamp duty and land tax and stuff like that. But like, talk about it.
Secondly, we need to sort out the energy problem that we've got. This was one of the themes and not to necessarily politically endorse one side or the other. I was invited to Matt Canavan's roundtable, which was held on the Wednesday in the room above where the secret productivity roundtable was being held in the cabinet room below. And Matt invited people from the resources sector, from mining, from industry, and I was invited along with Gary Banks, David.
Okay, so you can really tell there's this secret roundtable that you don't know about. That's actually the real roundtable, and we have people from the energy sector. Not going to name people. And also from the mining sector. Oh yeah, because the mining sector is definitely going to go. Let's go renewables.
Pearl, former assistant treasurer, Gary Banks, former head of the Productivity Commission, and there was general agreement that the big problems we've got are excessive government spending and very high energy costs. We see how much energy costs have spiked since we started this rollout of renewables without a balanced energy plan. So essentially we're going heavy on renewables when we have to have all of the additional storage. We need to rely more on gas to balance supply and demand at times when there's not enough energy. And we end up with these very high prices in wholesale market, which translate into higher retail prices. So we've had this big shock, which is affecting consumers and it's affecting industry. So we've got all...
Oh man, all right. This fucking argument around the price has gone up over the rollout of renewables. I don't know how many times I think I've done a few videos on this and I've brought it up. It is so evidently, there's so much reporting done on the reason why energy has spiked. Here, I'll show you. Why did energy prices spike in 2022? Australia's 2022 energy spike was driven by a combination of increased global fuel prices, a disruption of domestic coal supply, and a surge in domestic electrical demand, exacerbating by extreme weather, right? Which caused power outages and stuff like that. High global demand for coal and gas, partly due to the war in Ukraine, increased costs for Australian generators, while disruptions to aging coal-fired power plants reduced their outputs. This is a Google search, right? In none of this is renewable rollout an issue. Okay? That's in 2022. That's like that's when there was the biggest sort of spike and when there was huge outages, and that's when the Ukraine war kicked off as well. Okay? It doesn't take long to look at this stuff, and you still have these goddamn talking points. And I mean, like, the only good thing that this guy actually said then was that it was a mix. Some people are just saying, get rid of renewables altogether. At least he kind of said a mix. So, I agree there needs to be a mix and there needs to be a rollout. And, I think, the net zero target, regardless, it doesn't mean no coal or gas. It just means you have to offset that to some extent. It's a net zero, not a zero. But, oh my God, like that. They keep saying the reason why the energy prices spike is because of renewables. I think that there is more evidence to support that it is due to aging coal plants closing down and because they're faulty and all those sort of things. And when the coal goes down, the gas prices go up and blah, 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 blah. Like it's so much evidence is there. So I don't know why this talking point is so ingrained into their brain. They can't even do a Google search that then has like, there's so much evidence to support that it's not due to renewables. Anyway,
all of these refiners.
Oh, and if I'm talking funny, it's because I've got my Invisaligns in last week, so I apologize. I'm still getting used to them.
And smelters, which are now needing bailouts from the government. We've got BHP and we've got big companies like that saying that they may have to cut jobs in Australia just because we're such a high-cost jurisdiction. So we've really got to fix energy, and it's having a more balanced policy. It's removing the ban on nuclear power, so we can potentially have.
Do you know what's introducing new jobs? Oh, that's right. You better bloody believe it. It's the rollout of renewables. It is generating new jobs. Okay. You might lose jobs in some sectors, and then you're going to gain jobs in new sectors. That's what's called change.
Have that as part of the mix, and it's about dialing down the commitment to this very strong, very fast rollout of renewables, which is just driving up costs and costing consumers and business.
Okay, and I couldn't agree more.
Now, what I think he said at the very, very last point there,
renewables, which is just driving up costs and cost.
I think. If you look at my last few videos, or if you look at my videos, you could probably say, and you probably like, when I talk about renewables, I'm kind of like, I sound very, very pro renewables and net zero rollout and all that sort of stuff. Okay, I can get that because that's what it kind of sounds like because I'm arguing against, these fucking retards about, some of this stuff, but who can't even look at reports. Like it's so bloody simple, right? I'm not saying that net 2050 is like it is 100% the way we have to go or anything like that, okay? Because I just tend to just complain about the fact that these people just can't even do basic sort of research in a way, and they're meant to be presented as professionals. It is a fact that there are very good arguments against renewables, such as the speed at which they are rolling them out. And then we can sort of talk about, okay, well, what speed should it be? I think that is a much better question than just going, energy prices have gone up. It's all because of renewables. We need to get rid of all renewables. Like that just seems to be like it's either one way or the other. Instead of going, okay, renewables is a target. We need to hit some sort of reductions in emissions, blah, blah, blah. Maybe instead of 2050, we go to 2060, maybe instead of the 2030. And they've actually even reduced the target that they were originally going to meet at 2030. Already the government's done that. So they're even addressing that to some extent as well. But that's not being talked about, which is really frustrating too. There are some good arguments. And I think, I don't even know if he's actually carefully talking about that. But that is a much better conversation than probably the rest of what they've said in the last two
consumers and business.
Okay, and I couldn't agree more on all of that, and I think it's critical and important, and we've got to get onto it fast. Instead, what we have is this: the Productivity Commission itself, with its investing in cheaper, cleaner energy and the net zero transition report. Proposing a classification of all 11 million homes in Australia according to their climate resilience. This is why are we getting stuff like this coming out of a productivity commission? Let alone a productivity roundtable of mostly left-wing thinkers.
The headline's wrong. Investing in cheaper electricity.
Yeah,
the prices are there. The input costs are incredibly high. Gene's point is the right one, and Graham's also touched on it as well. That cost input you've got being burdened by the private sector. The spending capacity, basically being there's crowding out everything else is the government. And I go back to, again, my favourite talking point, the small business, like that ability to innovate. This productivity roundtable seems to have left out the one thematic which didn't make the cut, innovation. And then they want to try and regulate that too with their AI and all these things. The bottom line is really about this roundtable, which we saw during the week, was a rehash, no new ideas, more regulation. And the simple fact is that critical area, the magic ingredient of any economy, the one that's going to prosper is the one that's going to be more efficient, come up with better innovation. It's an afterthought. And this idea of energy in terms of, I don't want to be critical of Mr. Bowen.
Yeah. If they're looking at reducing corporate tax, that way business owners have pay less tax, and then they can it's more of an incentive to start a business. Isn't that a benefit to people to open up their own businesses and try and innovate and stuff like that. And regarding if we're just going to pick on renewables, for example, there are heaps of incentives for startups to look into new battery technology, charging technology, and all that sort of stuff, refining technology. There's heaps of government incentives to do that. Even in defense alone, to start a startup in defense, that's a lot of help there from government. So I don't, unless I'm missing something, if you guys know something better, or if you think that what this guy's saying is 100% accurate and I'm off the rails, share below, because I think the biggest incentive for a business owner would be that not only do you get to embark on a journey where you can start something great and make a difference in your own way and that sort of stuff, but is to know that you're not going to get taxed through the ringer when you actually start making money, on top of all the other pressures of if you end up having staff and all that sort of stuff too. I think there is a very good conversation around that, and people should feel incentivized to start their own businesses and not feel like they're going to find themselves in a hole. But I don't, this guy's talking point, I just don't 100% agree with it.
The simple fact is that critical area, the magic ingredient of any economy, the one that's going to prosper is the one that's going to be more efficient, come up with better innovation. It's an afterthought. And this idea of...
And also I think people think of productivity as innovation. The only thing you can do for productivity to be productive is innovate and to create new things and stuff like that. There's also the other side of innovation or productivity, which is getting more output for the same input, or you can have the same output with less input. And I think that's the side that people don't really think of in terms of productivity, because we're always just thinking of getting more, and getting more. And I think that there was a lot of discussion around how can you get the same output with less input too. I think that's also something to be considered.
Energy in terms of, I don't want to be critical of Mr. Bowen, the energy minister at the national level, but I have to be. I mean, this is almost like a crusade in terms of renewables good, anything else in the mix is bad. It's a terrible, terrible headline to continually spit out because it's just not borne out in fact. And, if you look at Australia, I mean, I lived in Hong Kong and, all over, and I mean, it is a very tough place now to extract a dollar. And when the aspiration is, if you look at some of the advocacy groups, is to tax, what do you want to be like France, where, be the top of the scale? We're not competitive and we've got problems, and we don't really want to talk about it at a microeconomic level. We have these 11 million homes in the macro thematic. Again, it's the thematic. The hard work at the community level is always the toughest bit. The end.
Yeah. It's just extraordinary to me. I mean, I can't understand how we can put small business down, how we can have no focus on innovation, we can have high energy costs, and we think this is a productivity summit. Matt Canavan, I thought, had a...
See, all of what you just said then was just, that's wrong, right? They are talking about small business by, looking at reducing corporate tax. I mean, I know that's not the only tax, but, that is something that is being addressed. They're looking at small businesses. They are looking at reducing the income tax so everyone feels more incentivized to work. They don't feel like all the burden is on their primary job. And at energy prices, they're looking at the best ways possible that with the information that they have to reduce energy prices. So I just don't understand this whole talk. Like, I can't argue against it because that's everything that I've seen. Anything that he's sort of talking about is just slop.
Great line on this. He was talking about, we've gone from some of the.
But hey, let me know what you think. Comments below. If you think I'm full of it, put in the thing. If you agree, and if anyone has any good resources, throw them my way. It's always good to read.
The cheapest energy prices in the world to the highest energy prices in the world, and that is fundamental to sorting out this productivity decline. And he said you've got people with economic degrees sitting around this table who've somehow just forgotten how critical low energy prices are to productivity and to economic growth. Great.
Yeah, well, there's a straight line relationship, I like to say, between energy consumption and civilization. But that same straight line exists with productivity. We only have the society we live in today with all the wealth that we've got, so that, 4 of us have got time even to sit around a table talking to you, is because we've worked out how to harness the universe to our benefit. And if you increase the cost of that input, it's like increasing the cost of any other input. It decreases your output per unit, and productivity. Someone said to me, I don't think the average punter knows what productivity is. And the government has tried to redefine it as or doing things better or whatever, but it's basically doing more with less.
Yeah.
So if the cost of less goes up, then you're trying to do more, but with more, and that doesn't work.
No. We've got the ACTU in the room talking. I mean,
Yeah, so he sort of touched on what I was saying before about, there are 2 types of, you didn't really touch on it, but, talking about the definition of productivity, I think people need to, think about it again. Not talking about defining, but look at different ways. Like, it's not just about, getting more out of what you have. It's also trying to get what you got by using less. You can use that on some sort of slogan. But again, there still hasn't been any alternative suggestions in this.
talked about the 4-day work week last week. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Only in Australia could you come up with, one way to increase productivity would be to drop to the working hours from 30. It's not about the days, but they're talking about 38 to 30. I mean, hours a week. That's the problem. I don't know how many days you do.
I've got to give my zinger line. The ACTU, have done more for productivity, than what Jack the Ripper did for late night shopping. I mean, it is, these things, these are thought bubbles. They have no, basis in fact. In fact, the union movement have next to zero representation in the private sector, in most industries.
Yeah, well, right.
It's completely absurd. They're offering their hot take on,
It's incredible. And they're not a balance.
Next to nothing? I thought the union, it's just less than 10%. I mean, I know it's a bit more in like governments, but I thought it wasn't next to nothing. I still thought they had a, fair decent. And I don't think they're saying like a blanket 30-hour week, like going from a 38-hour to a 30-hour week. And I think there's lots of, it's not talking about like, I don't think they actually quite understand what the 4-day work week was. Like, I think they're just looking at it like you get to work late. Well, this is what we were just talking about before about, how can you get the same output with using less? And that's what they're trying to address there. And already just trying to shut it down. If it was an option to get the same output by using less, then that if that is possible, that should be a discussion. And then that's what the union is trying to bring forward. And already they're knocking it back and they're saying it's bollocks, but they haven't even, like, you won't even be able to test it if you do that. Now, I understand the 4-day work week, like, it might not work in every single sector. And I think they know that too. Like, obviously, a 4-day work week is probably not going to work in like defense or, hospitals or, something like that. That would be chaos, or like teaching and stuff like that. But as soon as you remove that discussion from the table, there you go. Like, you've already said, okay, from that specific bit alone, you cannot generate the same output with less. Therefore, 50% of your productivity discussion is gone. The only thing we can look at now is by how do we get more with what we got, and that is an unproductive, outcome in terms of these conversations. So that's sort of what I'm talking about. Like, when they don't actually sort of look at productivity in the right way.
union organisation anyway. You can see they're quite ideologically radical. So the 4-day work week was one thing, but this idea that they start talking about AI and suggesting that the workers should be the ones to determine the rollout of AI in the workplace. Well, technology is not going to take a back seat to the preferences of Sally McManus and the ACTU, and the world's not going to either.
It might do, and the world might not either, but countries have managed to do those sorts of things, and that is the recipe for deteriorating living standards with respect to the rest of the world. One of the things that sort of struck me about the whole thing is...
Okay, hang on. So if you've got... I think what Sally McManus is actually talking about is, when she talks about like the regulations and stuff like that, she's talking about like copyright and making sure that there's regulations in place to say that like if a company finds out that, they can use AI to replace some of your... some of the work that you do, that you're not going to eventually go down the line of being like, okay, well, AI is just going to completely, do your role, and therefore you've got no job. I think that's more or less the lines that she wants. Like, she's saying that there should be some safeguards there for people if you begin to invest in AI in those areas. And if we talk about that 4-day work week, those 8 hours that you are now saving could be taken over by AI. Okay, so your AI is basically doing that day's work for you. And that's what they're talking about as a whole concept, right? And that's and you need to make sure that one day where the AI does its thing, you want to make sure it safeguards and takes the rest of the hours and things like that. Like that's what I think where they're going with it. It might not be 100% accurate, but I think that is more the conversation that they're having. And you can really tell that this guy here, he's like, well, they're actually already doing it in other countries. And, now their living standards have dropped. Who? Okay, if you're so knowledgeable in this, then tell us who. I highly doubt that if you could go to like a 4-day work week and then you've got AI doing some of your job and then your living standards are going to decrease. I just don't believe that. If I can get the same output in my work and do less hours, mate, I'm taking that 100%. So this is what I mean. Like, I just think that they talk about like the unions having an ideology. They talk about the Labour government having an ideology, and socialists and blah blah blah. But like, I don't think they realise that they have the strongest bias of anyone, and it's so evident. I think the guy to his right might be a little bit, the guy with the secret economic table with all the secret mining people that no one knows about, which is the real round table. I think he's kind of the only one that sort of touched on something, it's kind of semi-accurate about the energy rollout pace.
And it's been brought back today by the Chinese comments about Taiwan, is that we're living potentially in the shadow of another war. President Xi has said 2027, he wants to have Taiwan taken back. The Americans have basically said, no, you're not. We've got all these bases on Australia. Now, war is basically economies by other means. And if you've got a weak economy, and that's where we're heading, you are vulnerable. And that wasn't any part of the discussion. We're all carrying on as though life is just a series of parties smoking pot on the beach at Byron Bay. And mum and dad will come along and clean up afterwards. And so, what we've got here will just keep itself.
You bloody boomer. You can't talk like that, you boomer.
So let me get you straight. He's upset that the potential, okay, just because Xi Jinping has said that they're going to take over in 2027, he said that they're going to be able. Like, I remember reading that report thing. I think I even did it on stream too. He didn't say that he's going to. He said that they're going to be capable of doing that in 2027. Meaning the capability is there. It doesn't mean they're going to do it. It just means that the capability is going to be there. Okay? You can be capable. You can say you're going to be capable of many, many things. It doesn't mean that you're actually going to do it. And it's kind of, and it could just be a scare tactic, and that's a way to get the things moving. But then using like, okay, well, the economic roundtable should have addressed this stuff in China. Blah blah blah. Like, I think that is veering off point of what the productivity roundtable was about. And if you're going to sit there and cry about how they're not talking about small business enough and innovation, stuff like that, and then be upset that they didn't talk about the defense side of things, like in terms of that, like what?
God forbid.
Like, nothing is ever going to be good enough, which is what I'm getting. And once again, like, they're not coming up with alternative. Like, if you're talking about that defense thing with Xi Jinping, okay, what should have been discussed and in what detail? Like, tell me what would have made you happy from the outcome of that roundtable? That's a pretty good question.
On their war money.
And if you guys think that there's an outcome that wasn't addressed in the roundtable, please drop in the comments below.
Enough with the avocado and the cafe lattes, mate. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing on the AI? Can you imagine Sam Altman, who basically led the ChatGPT in the collective consciousness as we now know it? I mean, could you imagine these guys, just looking at this round table going, you know what, they would have shrugged their shoulders about Australia.
Australia.
They would have gone Australia.
Yeah.
The Pacific's version of Canada. That's really what they would have said. Like this nonsense that you've got these, for a while there, the financial markets thought, you know what, we're going to sort these cryptocurrencies out. Guess what? The world moves on. Technologies, regulation is going to find it very, very tough to keep up.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So productivity and AI, NDIS controls were the other thing. Now, look, the NDIS, something's got to be done about the NDIS because it's just blowing out. We can't have. It would be lovely if we could support everybody all the time for everything, but there has to be a line drawn somewhere with the NDIS, or it's going to collapse, right? And they've decided to draw the line around this spike in everybody saying it's and there is a lot of autism out there. I'm not diminishing that at any point, but the reality is that the NDIS is supposed to be for more serious disability, not moderate disability so much.
So they're removing it from the NDIS spectrum, so to speak.
Yes, they are moving it though to a new program that's going to cost $2 billion federally, and for which they're going to ask the states to chip in for a few billion, I think. But any thoughts on how we manage health and disability services moving forward, guys, in a way that's sustainable? Is it going to send us broke?
There's a fundamental philosophical problem here, in that they think that
it's funny how he talks about this here is much more just looking at his behavior and the way that he speaks, and it actually sounds more like he's actually concerned. That kind of felt a little bit more wholesome than all the rest of his slop that he talked about. So I think this is a very good topic, and I hope that they actually have a decent conversation here.
Is it going to send us broke?
there's a fundamental philosophical problem here, in that they think that benefits ought to be universal. Now, Labor is in a better position to deal with these sorts of issues than the Coalition. And the history of Australia is that it's Labor that's actually put the brakes on welfare programs in the past. Why should the NDIS be available to everyone, irrespective of income? If Gina Reinhardt had an autistic child, why should she be able to get money off the NDIS? And I'm just taking Gina as an extreme example that the left like to throw in people's faces. So just means testing it. The whole idea that somehow we're born into life and we get to keep all the goodies and the government underwrites all the baddies and ensures that everyone has exactly the same standard of living is just nonsensical. And people like Paul Keating understood that. They understood that these programs end up eating a whole lot of other things that are required for people who are also unfortunate or fallen off the wagon.
Of course, there's only so much to go around in terms of what we can tax people and put into the public purse, but people aren't thinking that way. We're not educating Australians to think that way.
Well, the problem is that voters have got used to, and I think this is possibly a COVID effect, the idea that government will step in. If there's anything bad there, they will step in and they'll fix it for you.
Yeah.
They're the ones that ought to be responsible, rather than saying, look, can you say shit happens on this program?
You can.
Shit happens. And you want a resilient economy so that people have got their own resources to deal with it.
You also want resilient people, and you don't build resilient people by suppressing innovation, by killing small business and people who want to get out and have a go, by making it incredibly difficult for people to have a go, and by creating a general cultural mood of A, victimhood, and B, a sense of oppression by some mean oppressor, when it's not really happening either. To get a little bit philosophical about it for a second. Gene Tunney, your comment on this NDIS situation, or just in terms of our social services?
Well, they certainly need to do something. So it's.
I think what he touched on there before about should the NDIS be available for everyone? That's kind of like an equality thing. You are an Australian, therefore you are, everyone can have a go at, using the NDIS just as anyone else. And let's use Gina Reinhardt as an example. Multi-billionaire. If her kid has autism, should she be able to access the NDIS scheme for her kid? Well, yeah, she's technically, yeah. Even though she is a billionaire, that's the whole point of the Australian culture is that it is hard because when you look, depends on what lens you're looking at it through. Because then when you start talking about the superannuation stuff and and then it kind of gets dispersed, and then when you look at it's funny when you talk about NDIS and disability schemes, stuff like that, and then you try and look at do you apply those same principles across taxing? They kind of contradict each other. Poor man. I had a little autistic spasm there too. So I think that needs to. Yeah, and that's it. What do you guys think?
It's good in a way that they're addressing it. There are concerns about how they've gone about it. They haven't consulted properly with advocacy groups, with families. So I think there are concerns around that. I've got to declare a conflict of interest here. I'm on the board of a non-profit that advocates for families with children with a developmental delay. And the concerns from the sector are that this has just been announced suddenly. There's been no proper consultation. So I think it's bad in that regard. But look, I mean, credit to the government. They need to address the cost of NDIS. It's been growing at 20% per year. Okay. So it's doubling in size in over just a bit over 3 years. Okay. And their target is to get it down to 8%, right? Which is still faster than the economy. It grows about 5% or something in nominal terms. So it's still going to be growing as a share of the budget, as a share of the economy. So even their target for what they'd be happy to get it down to is still too high. So that they really do need to do something. I'm concerned.
Yeah, like they're addressing NDIS, and I think they've, is the NDIS is becoming, was it like 2015 or something like that? Is when it started to go completely nuts, and it is a serious problem in Australia, and that's why it's it's obviously taking off in government, and it's such a huge debate. But like, I think this Labor government, what they do is they tend to make very, very ambitious goals, and then they say very, very ambitious goals, and then people just take it to the letter of what they're saying. And I think there's two types of people. I think there's people that are going, they have this very ambitious goal, and the reason why they do that is because they want to try and achieve that, and they do the things that they want to say these very large goals such that it gets people moving, and they do try and, like net zero, the house, what is it, like 1.5, million houses, or 1.2 million housing. And, they make these really, and producing the NDIS. So they make these big, bold claims because they want things to move, and they want to show also to the Australian people that, we do see it as a serious, weight on the Australian budget. And then you get the people who are like, okay, well, that's too ambitious. You need to do more. You're not going to reach that, etc., etc. And I think it's just interesting to see like the two sides play. I'm not saying that anyone here is one or the other, but as long as it's not too far, like with Trump, Trump saying he's going to end the Ukraine Russia war, before he's even in office, like that. That's way too ambitious. And then it's nothing like that. It's actually if they got everything, if the Labor government were to get all their ducks to align, they probably could pull things off if everyone was on board. But you get like a lot of resistance in most of these things.
About the way they've got here and how they're going to push all these costs onto the states. So this is about cost shifting to the states. It's about getting children onto what they call foundational supports. And they haven't really dealt the states into it. Graham's point before, we haven't got the state treasurers there. Mookie's there, Daniel Mookie, who seems very good from New South Wales, but he's just one state. They really need to talk to all the states about this.
Somebody on Twitter was saying yesterday that we should really be looking at just cleaning up the rip-offs, the scams, and the way people are taking the mickey out of the NDIS. But do you think there is a lot of that going on?
Yes.
Okay. So if we clean that up, would that bring it down? And not enough. You
no.
still have to draw a line.
Well, we're spending 46 to 48 billion this financial year, or something of that magnitude. It's around 50 billion, so $50,000 million on the NDIS. I mean, I've no doubt there's rorting, and it's probably billions of dollars of rorting. But still, the fundamental problem is just the high rate of eligibility. And I mean, what Graham's talking about with potentially means testing. I mean, maybe we should be looking at something like that. It's the parameters of the scheme. It's not just rorting. Rorting's part of it, but we're still not going to solve the problem with cracking down on rorting.
Yeah. All right, we'll come back in a
Yeah, I dare say, people taking advantage of the NDIS scheme is probably calculated into the budget, and you think of it like a write-off. It's going to happen with that many people using it, and something that's probably not overlooked with a fine-tooth comb. Like, some things should be something that massive. Like, you're always going to have people taking advantage of the system.
moment, and we'll talk tax with our roundtable on the roundtable here on the other side. Did you know that with a virtual private network, or VPN, on your computer, tablet, or phone?
All right. Okay, that was that. I dare say that. The thing is with this sort of these sort of videos is, it's nice to hear people's perspectives and stuff like that, but these kind of very far righty kind of, they just basically attack every single point. They don't sort of trail on to any of the good productivity stuff or anything like that. What can you do? So where you agree with these guys or where you disagree with these guys, put it in the comments below. Where you agree or disagree with me, put it in the comments below. Always reading them. It's always good to see people engaging. And don't forget to like and subscribe.